My name is Robert, and I'm appearing before your beautiful faces today to talk to you about the 3 tenets of pumpkinism. Now, I realize I'm a bit of a new face on this channel, but I hope that's going to change soon, and I'm very excited to become a bigger part of this wonderful community. Now, let's get into it. Today I would like to discuss what the tenets are, what they mean, and how you can follow them in your everyday lives. Very basically, the tenets are the pillars of our faith. Because the Great Pumpkin accepts all people, you don't even need to believe in the existence of our great God. You do have to follow the tenets to get into the last patch. Now, moving on, what actually are the 3 tenets? Tenet number 1, according to the holy text. In a nutshell, live with reason. This just means that you shouldn't make boneheaded decisions. Don't ruin your life by committing mass homicide. Don't spend your life worrying about it all, and be reasonable. Now, jokes aside, I believe that this is actually the easiest tenet to follow. Simply live your life according to the principles of logic and reason. In order to think of ways to use this in your everyday life, just come up with any everyday situation in which you're presented with a decision, and then make that decision based on logic and reason. Make that decision to benefit you and to benefit others. Don't harm other people. Now, this doesn't mean that you shouldn't make mistakes. Mistakes are fine. In fact, mistakes are good. But you shouldn't make mistakes more than once. You should learn from your mistakes, and you should grow from them. This tenet also means that you should believe and trust in the world of science. After all, living with reason involves making informed decisions, and your decisions can only be informed through testimony from experts. In this case, living with reason means doing things like vaccinating your children, trusting experts more than politicians, and wearing a mask during a worldwide health crisis. Up next, we have tenet number 2. According to the holy text, live for life. Don't live for the afterlife. You have one time on earth with a living body, so don't waste it holding yourself back because something says you have to be a certain way. You're living to live, not to please anyone. Now, in my opinion, this is actually the hardest tenet to follow because it's quite vague. But it basically just means that you shouldn't live the way you live because you're trying to get somewhere in an afterlife. You should live how you want to live. You should live the way that benefits you, and you should be a good person, not because it'll get you somewhere, but because it's the right thing to do. Now, this tenet also means that you can't not do bad things just because you're going to get put into eternal damnation, because, let's face it, you won't. But at the same time, you should still be a good person. That's why this tenet is vague. It's saying that you should live life for yourself, but not be selfish. You should not do bad things, not because you don't want to get to eternal damnation, but because it's the wrong thing to do. Another thing that is difficult about this tenet is that while the Church of the Great Pumpkin does not generally endorse the breaking of laws, it does say you're living life for life, not to please anyone. Live your life to have fun and to live it the way you want to live it. But just take some common sense with that as well. Don't break any laws or endanger anyone or yourself. Finally, another thing that's difficult about this tenet is that while the Church of the Great Pumpkin generally does not go against organized religion, in fact, we're accepting of people of all faiths, this tenet specifically says that there is no afterlife, so it can be interpreted as going against organized religion. However, we can choose to interpret it as just thinking a different way, and people who believe in the afterlife aren't necessarily bad people. But to be a member of the Church of the Great Pumpkin, you need to live life for life. You can't live it for the afterlife. Now, the final thing is coming up with ways to use this tenet in your everyday life. Now, this is difficult, but basically just don't fool yourself by thinking that there's something beyond. Live your life for right now. Live in the present moment, and it'll all work out. Alright folks, thanks for sticking with me for this long. We only have one tenet left, the final tenet, and in my opinion the most important. Live without discrimination. It's important to note that there are equal amounts of both sexes and no race in the holy texts. Don't be sexist or racist. See everyone as your pumpkin brethren. Is that too much to ask? Now, since this is a very delicate subject, I think we should start with what is mentioned in the tenet itself, the holy text. Now, as mentioned, there are no races in the texts. After all, Festiva's purple, and Vinia's green. And as for gender, there are 6 characters whose gender is mentioned: the Great Pumpkin, the Earth, Festiva, Vinia, Spider, and the Ataman. and of those 6, there are 3 males and 3 females. I feel that this is indicative of the Church's position on all forms of discrimination, namely that people must be equal and judged by their ability and attitude over race, gender, and sexual orientation. We must see all people as our pumpkin brethren. In the same vein, the Church officially condemns discrimination of all forms on the basis of gender, race, or anything else. The Church also officially supports things like the following: the Black Lives Matter movement, specifically in light of the recent protests about police brutality; the Pride movement on behalf of the LGBTQ+ community; and the #MeToo movement, as well as other movements relating to ending sexism and sexual harassment. Now, I realize that a white boy may not be the best one to preach this to you, but I ask that you not let that take away from the message. So let me repeat. All forms of discrimination are antithetical to the Church of the Great Pumpkin, and that's the quickest way to get yourself booted from ever being considered for the last patch, and you're going to have Festivus demons force feed you mac and cheese beef chili for eternity. Now, what are some ways to follow this in your life? Simply don't be discriminatory. Don't judge a book by its cover, and don't take advantage of those with less privilege than you, like a Karen might. Well, folks, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Please consider what I've said, and see you next time. Goodbye.